she would get a fever the next day and we would end up in the ER. And like one thing just kept leading to the next, and bleeding sequestration. And now Alessia can't walk because this pain crisis was so bad that she has to go to PT and relearn how to walk. And like these things just kept happening. And I remember after the third admission in a 2 to 3 month time interval, one of the doctors sat down with me and they're like, hey, I think it's time that you guys consider having a sibling.
Hey, Sickle family. I'm Wumi Bakare.
I'm Christelle Solomon, and we would like to welcome you to the Through the Genes podcast,
where we talk about living,
healing,
recovering,
and exploring transformative therapies for sickle cell disease.
We will also talk about our individual journeys and the bond that we have built as sickle cell sisters. Hey, Sickle family. Welcome back to season 2 of the Through the Genes podcast, where we have real, unfiltered conversations about sickle cell disease, advocacy, and cutting-edge treatments. I'm your host, Wumi Bakare, and I have my fantastic co-host.
Hello, Sickle fam. Christelle here.
Today, we're going to delve into the topic, support systems in the transformative process. If you are curious about what does it take to support a patient during a gene therapy or bone marrow transplantation, then this is the episode for you. We're going to explore how caregivers, patient networks, and the community support and empower individuals who are going through transformative therapies for sickle cell disease. I would like to welcome to the show our guest today. Christelle and I were incredibly blessed to have met her through the Transformative Therapy Support Group, Project Spirit. Shout out to Reverend Lorraine. And her 2 daughters, Vida and Alessia, have been through so much and are still in their recovery journey. So, Maite Rodriguez, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I love this because I am 5 years post. Christelle is 3 years post. But you are barely 4 to 6 months out.
Alessia is about to be 4 months out. Yeah.
Okay. So the emotions are still current and real.
Oh, yeah.
The cognitive recollect is still sharp. And so today I'm excited to have you on the show because I think oftentimes we watch and read the stories of warriors who have undergone these therapies, but we don't often hear from the parents who have either been there as a primary caregiver to their kids or been there in the capacity of being a donor to their child. Specifically, if we're talking about stem cell transplantation. So starting off today, we're going to walk our audience through the pre-therapy journey as a caregiver. Now, let's start by getting some personal insights from you. Can you share what Alessia's sickle cell journey was leading up to your family being curious about transformative therapies?
Yeah. Of course. So Alessia was diagnosed at birth, and I always knew I was a sickle cell carrier. That was just something that we talked about in our family. But there was also this conversation around sickle cell trait is only carried by people of color. I married the fairest skinned Hispanic man you could ever find, with green eyes and like all of the markings of someone that apparently wouldn't have sickle cell. So when Alessia, it wasn't a planned pregnancy, we have Alessia and she gets tested and, here we are, we have sickle cell. We were in disbelief. My husband went and got tested and it confirmed that he was a carrier. So from there, we kind of just went back and forth to the doctor for the first few months, just doing all the blood work that needs to be done at that stage, starting her on the penicillin, starting her on folic acid. And at 6.5 months, while we were in Honduras visiting my husband's family, Alessia has her first pain crisis. And it came because she decided not to drink milk overnight. And it was really hot. So she became dehydrated, has her first pain crisis. And being in Honduras, this is my first time dealing with sickle cell. I didn't know what to do. Thankfully, his sister's a doctor, and she had worked under the supervision of one of the 2 pediatric hematologists in the country. So we traveled from one city to another, like a 4-hour trip, just following that doctor and taking Alessia to the doctor, and she confirmed it. From there to the point that Alessia was 9 months, she had a couple more pain crises and ER visits, and it was truly just us discovering what triggered the pain crisis. Not because we wanted to, but just through living normal life. We went to the playground one day and it was 72 degrees. Alessia was wearing 3 layers of clothing. It was a nice spring day, but that sent her into a pain crisis. So I remember having the conversation with the doctor very early on in the journey where she said, when it starts like this, it's usually not an easy journey. And she did say that, and I'm like, okay, like I'm preparing to be in that top tier of the people that don't do so well with sickle cell, because there are a lot of people that live with sickle cell and live a fairly normal life. So she did well after we started hydroxyurea at 9 months. And the day that she turned 9 months, that day she was admitted to the hospital with a pain crisis. Started hydroxyurea the next day. Didn't have another issue for 2.5 years. But then at that point, she started having more pain crises and she started getting sick often. Whenever she was around someone that had a cold, she would get a cold. Whenever she was around someone that sneezed, she would get a fever the next day and we would end up in the ER. And like one thing just kept leading to the next, and spleen sequestration. And now Alessia can't walk because this pain crisis was so bad that she has to go to PT and relearn how to walk. And like these things just kept happening. And I remember after the third admission in a 2 to 3 month time interval, one of the doctors sat down with me and they're like, hey, I think it's time that you guys consider having a sibling. Because this was also a conversation that we had before, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do, to have the next child just for the purpose of serving as a donor for Alessia. So we were like, okay, let's do this. We were going to have more kids, and we knew that we had to, like, this was something that we were going to do. It's just that I also didn't want to go through the IVF process, because this doesn't mean let's just have a kid. So we started the fertility treatments, pre-implantation genetic happens, all the carrier testing, all of what that process involves. And we end up with 21 embryos. Out of our 21 embryos, half of them have sickle cell. The other half are sickle cell free, but have like a whole bunch of different things. But out of the 21, we ended up with Arvida, and she was the one match that was sickle cell free. I went into labor while Alessia was admitted. So I went into labor at 35 weeks. We have Vida. I didn't think life could get more stressful than that week and that period in time. And it really did get stressful after that. Alessia ended up experiencing a lot of pain over those 2 months because of gallstones. It was going back and forth to doctor's appointments, ER visits, and nobody could tell us what was going on. But here we are with a kid that's in severe pain every time she eats the foods that she likes. And then one day starts having severe pain when she's drinking water. So we're like, something's really wrong here. We need to do something about it. So I remember just calling her doctor. We go to the ER and they confirm, okay, we have gallstones. She needs to have this procedure. We do the procedure. It goes terribly wrong. Ends up in a really bad pain crisis. Gets moved to the ICU. It was 72 hours of pure agony for me and my husband and Alessia. Meanwhile, I am breastfeeding, just having this baby and advocating for myself in the hospital. Okay, I just gave birth to this baby here. You walked me into the unit when you saw my water broke in the room. And I told him, you can't tell me that either kid needs me more right now. They both do. So let's figure something out, because I'm not going home. I promise you that, because Alessia needs me here. But I'm also not sending my baby home because she also needs me. So we figured out a way to keep them both in the hospital. And it was hell. It was really bad. Through the sickle cell journey with Alessia, being a caregiver, nothing has ever to this day felt as heavy as that weekend. And it was bad. And it was, I think, one of the first times where I was open with our community, just because everyone that's around us, close to us, knows about sickle cell. The people that we interact with on a regular basis know that Alessia lives with this. But we also kind of stepped back from a lot of what we did. They thought that we only did this because, we had a kid and this is what happens when you have a kid. It really wasn't that. We're trying to keep her from getting sick because she gets sick when you sneeze. So that's kind of when we just I posted something on Instagram and I'm like, hey, we could really use prayers right now. And it was bad. And thankfully she made it out of that and ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks and discharged home. And once she was discharged home, we continued with just getting back to normal and trying to keep her healthy, and became even more isolated just because we were in a lot of fear. Her spleen was acting up as well. So it was it was always something. So we were just no, we're just not going to leave our house. This is it. We're staying put. So we isolated a lot for the past year. And we made it to December. In December, we started all the pre-transplant testing until she was admitted in January, which is when we had scheduled the process for the transplant.
I want you to take a breath because I am sitting here, the goosebumps all over my body right now. My emotions are heightened and I'm just listening. I'm not telling the story. So having to unpack Alessia's complicated journey with sickle cell disease cannot be easy for you as a caregiver, because as a parent, the minute that child is conceived, your primary goal is to protect. And there's nothing worse than watching your young child navigating a very painful disease that you can't take away in the instant or share in their pain. And so as you were speaking, I was just like, I need you to take a breath because we're talking about real life here. And as you were sharing Alessia's journey, it reminded me of my own journey. My mom always says, you were great. So, till you were 18 months. And then it was all else hit the fan. First off, I want to just say this. Your walk in life has not been easy for either you or your husband. But it seems like at different pivotal moments, God has sent you helpers at your point of need, because it was a blessing that you went to Honduras and then his sister had a connection with providers. Especially, I share this all the time because many Americans, all they know about healthcare is the American healthcare system. But once you've been outside the US borders and you've seen, especially in third world countries or underdeveloped countries, what medical care looks like there is a really big eye opener for, is this going to be my child's journey with this disease as they venture into, teenagehood and then getting into college and then being a young adult. And so I appreciate you sharing that perspective, because I really hope that as caregivers and mothers listen to this episode, that they also recognize the gratitude in having a child that was born in the U.S., where they have the medical infrastructure to be able to care for these for kids. But with Alessia's journey, there was something you said, and I want to see if I can get a little bit more clarity. Did Alessia's providers bring up the topic of transplant, or did you, as a mother, watching your child's illness become more complex, do the research on your own to then reach out to the providers to say, hey, I think we need to start this process or start thinking about this transformative therapy process?
So the conversation started from the time that Alessia was very young. So with that first visit when Alessia was 2 weeks old, the doctor, I remember talking to her, and she said, there's a lot work going on with gene therapy. They asked me a couple of times, they're are you don't have any more kids? And I'm like, no, this is my first kid. We don't have any more children. They're like, how are you considering having any children in the future? And I said, yes, but this one just came out of me. So this is not that's not something that's in my mind right now. But we really did want to wait a little bit before we tried to have any other children. But it was a conversation that happened very early on in the journey. So we knew that the moment that we decided to have children, it would be we would have a kid through IVF, and we would possibly look for an HLA match for Alessia. just in case she ever needed it. But when the time came when like Alessia just kept getting sicker, they just kind of said, like, they sat me down, and I remember this vividly, by that big window in the hospital. The doctor sat me down and she's like, Maite, I know you guys don't want to right now, but I think you have to. Like, this is a lot. This is a lot. And she's like, and I, like, you're seeing it, and I see the heartbreak in your guys' eyes. This is something that you have to give her. And I think I needed that. I think I needed that, hey, it's okay that you feel like you don't want to do this, and we understand the moral and the ethical issues that you're experiencing in thinking about this, because this is not something that you don't ever have a kid thinking that this is what you're going to do. So it was an issue that was raised by, it was a thing that was brought up by them, but it was something that me and my husband always had in the back of our mind. Another issue is that IVF is expensive. IVF is really expensive. Any fertility treatment is really expensive. So it was also a matter of like, can we afford to have another child right now? Because it was going to cost us a lot of money to have another child. And money shouldn't be what drives that decision. But at that point, it was important. Yes, to answer your question, simply yes. They were the ones that brought it up.
Wow. You can tell by my pause how your story is moving me. I see we're all getting tissues, and I don't even know where to start. So I think first off, I'm encouraged to hear that this is a conversation that was brought up to you and not something that you had to wait for a dire moment with Alessia's health. We know that many of those moments happen to make you say, okay, maybe we need to speed up this process. But I'm glad that this was something that was brought up to you very early on, because the transformative therapy process, as you know, is not simple. It's not easy. Decisions are hard to make, especially considering all that you are juggling. And so to have had a year to even start thinking about that from week 2 of her life, when you get to 18 months, it's not a new conversation. And I hope that's an approach that we start to use more often for warriors, because oftentimes you hear people are getting to the point of, I had a stroke or my kidney's failing, and now this is becoming an option on the table, but I have so much to learn in such a short period of time, and I don't have time for fertility, and I don't have time to make informed decisions. I just have to go because it's life or death. Having that time to be prepared for something as big as transformative therapy, I'm just really encouraged to hear that your medical team was very intentional about having those conversations with you up front. At the same time, it doesn't make it any easier, and I just want to pick your brain a little bit about how you navigated that conversation with your husband and also with other people in your family, because there's like a phase. The doctor is telling you, and you're trying to internalize, how do I reconcile? I'm not ready to have a child right now, but I know I have a child who's living right now who is going to need this intervention moving forward. How do you balance that thought? And then you have to have a discussion with your husband, because this is your family that you're building together. And then navigating the opinions and the feedback and the input from your family. Like, how did you balance all of those things all at the same time? Tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
So the conversation with Dario, my husband, it was a simple one. Like, we're both very like-minded in the point that, this is our kid. We're going to do anything that we have to do to protect it. And if we have another child, we're going to love this child as much as we love Alessia. Like, there was no discussion in that. So we knew this is what's going to happen. Our families knew that at some point this would happen. Nobody knew what was going on, even though my sister came and stayed with Alessia a whole bunch of times. And my mom sometimes came and stayed with Alessia while I went to doctor's visits. I think they all knew that something was brewing, but nobody really asked. Because it was mostly out of respect. So it's funny because Dario's mom lives in Honduras, so she spent some time with us. over summer where I was going through the IVF process, and she kept asking me, she's like, where are you going at 6 a.m? And then you come back and you go there 3 times a week, and then you come back with like somebody did labs. And I'm like, well, I had that concussion at work 2 months ago, so that's what I'm doing. So it wasn't something that I wanted to share with anybody, because also with fertility treatment, not everything goes well the first time around. And we are the kind of people that if we want to focus on something, we'll focus on something. But that something is usually not going to be the bad thing that's happening. So with Alessia, like, a lot of people knew about the diagnosis, and we weren't hiding the diagnosis from anybody, but we also weren't sharing that this was a diagnosis. We were just living life, because that's what you do. So it was something that you knew if for some reason it came up in conversation, and that's it. Same thing with this. When people ask me, when are you having kids? I always said, well, like, you're not going to buy me diapers. So 1, why do you care? So 2 is, I don't know. It's not easy. It's like, it's not as simple as let me just have a kid for us. We have to go through this process. So our families were very supportive, and I think like just everybody saw that it was needed. I think that out of everybody, and even my husband, like, he doesn't struggle with the decision as much as I do. But I think everybody sees that, like, Vida is giving life, and Vida is helping, and she doesn't even realize, and it doesn't come at any cost to her. Like, literally won't feel it. But in my head, in my mom head, in my mental health worker head, like think about it as like, oh my God, am I messing up my kid? Like, is this something that she is going to carry with her for her life? Because it's not something that I want her to carry. It's not something that I want for her to have to think about. It's a very real decision. But Vida won't remember. She won't know what Alessia was going through. She will never remember life with sickle cell, thankfully. But I will, and my husband will. And because Alessia is so young, I don't think that she will remember so much of it or understand how much it was affecting her and how dangerous things were getting. So this is one of those decisions that as parents, you just have to make. As a caregiver, it's one of those difficult ones where it's like, okay, look, this is what's needed. This is what gives her the best chance in life. And we're going to have to do it. And that's it. And I think it's something that I will struggle with for a while. And it's like, I'm going to therapy for it, and I'm like working on it. And I understand that it's probably not that big of a deal, but it is to me.
I want to just say thank you for your vulnerability, because as you are ruminating through the thought process of how could this impact Vida in the future, when she knows that one of the reasons for her birth was to cure her older sister, it's a fair question. It's a fair thought. It's even brave of you to admit that you're having that thought, because most people can stand 10 toes deep and be like, I made the decision, my family is in a better place, the end. But the fact that you're willing to unpack that with us and share realistic expectations as far as it will probably always live with me. I'm working through it in therapy, but it might always live with me. I think a lot of caregivers need to hear that. I really appreciate that you said we kept the fertility process and IVF process to ourselves, because I went through IVF prior to transplant, and it does a number on you, mental and physically. But it's not just that. It's the 6 a.m. appointments, or 6 a.m. have to get a shot, or 3 times a week, then having to use a camera to see how many eggs have grown. It's a very invasive process.
We're caring for Alessia as best we can. But add to that all these visits to a doctor, add to that like all of what the hormones do to you. And it was just like it was all a blur. Like, it's like, it all happened so fast, but it was so heavy. Just the hormonal changes, the just not feeling yourself, which is something that I think we don't talk about enough. Like when you're pregnant and when you're going through fertility treatment, you are not the owner of this body you inhabit. Your body is someone else's at that point, because it really does feel very foreign to you. All of these things happen. Like, oh my God, now I'm seeing this commercial and I start crying. Or like a picture of the Disney World castle comes out and I'm like, oh my God, Disney World. Like, it's these things that happen and you're like, why is this happening? Like, why am I crying? I'm not supposed to be crying. Like, this is happy. Why am I? So it's these emotions that just come and go, and you don't necessarily understand why you're feeling this way, but you know you're feeling this way. But it also comes like it can mean that you're short-tempered. So like I find myself like snapping at people. And I'm like, why am I snapping at people? Like I shouldn't be this irritated by the chewing. Like it's little things.
Women are walking miracles. That's all I have to say. But because you have who needs you to be married and trying to maintain the relationship between your husband and yourself and keep that bond strong and strengthened is a lot to juggle as a woman. Then you now want to tack on a job. It would push most people to their brink. But I think you carried it with so much grace, and I'm so glad that God carried you this far. I wanted to then talk about this a little bit, which is, as the matriarch of your family, how do you prepare your family for the transplant process? Because many don't know, it requires a lot of in-depth conversation. Who goes what to where? And who's supporting her at this time? Let's find a contingency backup plan for like if I fall ill, does my husband then take center stage? And like it's a lot of planning. It's also a lot of financial planning because you have to take time out of work to be a present caregiver. They wouldn't even let you go through the process of transformative therapies if you don't take time, especially for that initial 4 to 6 month pre, during, and then the early post after your day 0. How did you prepare your family for that process?
So mentally, for Alessia, Dario, and me, Vida's too young again to understand anything that's going on. But for Alessia, the process started way before, like, and again, because I know this was something that could happen in the future. We had this conversation, and I try to be very open, and I'm one of those people that does think that children do need to be involved in these processes, especially when it's happening to their bodies. And Alessia is very inquisitive. She's always asking questions. So, like, why am I getting poked? I'm like, well, because this is what's going on with your blood. We called it special blood. And one day she's like, yo, this blood isn't special. Like, this isn't, I'm not liking this. Why is it acting up? And I was like, I know. So we always had these open conversations about bone marrow transplants and what that meant for people. And I started hinting one day. I'm like, hey, like one day you may have a bone marrow transplant and it'll get rid of your moon bloods. And she's like, oh, that sounds fun. And then the conversation started happening, but like when this happens, these are some of the side effects that you'll experience. This is what may happen. So my process and my fear was mentally, I think it was for her more. Like we needed to prepare her. My husband and I had a while to prepare for this. We had basically 5 years to think about this and like just to get ready for it mentally. And we still had a lot of every day we have conversations about this. And like back to something that you said earlier, we're just so thankful that we live here and not back in Dominican Republic where I'm from, or Honduras where he's from, because this is a possibility here. So we always talk about like, wow, the fact that we are able to go through this process here, it's amazing. And we are so blessed to be here. As many faults as the US health system may have, this is something that's working right and it's going well. But it was a conversation that we just tried to have. And we kind of like both tried to process all of this information together. It did take a toll in our mental health for both of us, just because it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And, like you're still preparing for this big thing, but you're living life, and you have to cook dinner, and you have to do dishes, and you have to clean, and you have a baby and a kid that need to be taken care of, and you're sleep deprived. Like, you're doing all of these things at once while still preparing for this other big thing. So mentally, it took a lot of work for both of us. Financially, it was a conversation that I started having at my job, and my husband started having at his job months prior. Even then, financially, we were not going to be ready. If it wasn't for the money that was raised with the GoFundMe, I don't know. I think I would have lost my mind a month or two ago. We really have a great community around us, but it is hard when it's not that we hide the diagnosis, but we don't make our lives about Alessia's diagnosis. Like, it doesn't revolve around that, even though it does for us. And this is something that's also not talked about enough. The process of having to say, well, she has sickle cell, and people going, well, what is sickle cell? And explaining what sickle cell is, and having that conversation, it's hard. It's hard because you have to explain how it affects you and how it affects them, and the changes that you've made in your life in order to accommodate life around living with sickle cell, which we'll do and we have done gladly. But explaining that to people takes a toll on you. So when we started sharing that this was what was going to happen, like, I remember my mom told me, she's like, like, a lot of people have reached out to me and they're saying that they didn't know that this was going on, or that they didn't understand that it was this bad, or that it could be this bad, or that there was even something that you could do to cure it. I'm like, well, there is, and this is the reality. But which is one of the reasons why I'm more open to sharing things in the last few months, it's that a lot of people have found community and some sort of hope in Alessia's stories. And because it's not, even though this is my life and this is what I see as normal, it's not normal that you're preparing for a bone marrow transplant. Like, I've connected with a lot of moms that are in the same spot, not just with sickle cell, but with a lot of other diseases. And it's just, it's great to see also that we're not alone in this, that there's people that are going through the same thing and having the same dilemmas that we are, and, worrying about their financial situation, worrying about their mental health. So yes, it's been a journey.
I do think culture adds, because when you come from a community of color and you come from culture, there is certain cultural norms that inform your identity. And I think outside of the pride, it was like, doesn't this feel like we're leveraging her story to ask for money?
Yes.
But the reality is, the entire process of transplant and gene therapy, I always say, even if you go through a clinical trial where it's technically free, which really isn't, but even if you go through a clinical trial, there are other miscellaneous costs that will show up. Really glad that you touched on that, because I say it all the time, that there is the process, there is the financial part of the process. And like you said, you guys had 5 years of planning, but guess what? Life's still life. There will be expenses that will make you have to dip into a fund you had prayed to never have to dip into. But again, it's just the reality of life. So thank you so much for sharing that.
It really is a thing where you do have to be vulnerable, and it's not easy to be vulnerable in front of people that it's easier to be vulnerable in front of people that you don't know and that don't know about you. But when you have to keep on showing up for people and being there for them, and them being there for you, it's a little harder. And I've met a lot of families along the journey that they just feel the same way. Like, this is not everybody's fight. This is our fight. But then you do have to understand that people are looking for a way to help. And it's hard to accept that. It's really hard, but it does help a lot. It really does. It gives you such relief.
Man, Maite, I can't thank you enough I think you touched on a lot of really important points, practically and also emotionally. And I think it takes work as a caregiver to learn how to receive help. because you're so used to giving and you know your role. You're like, I got to get this done. You're preparing dental appointments in advance. Like these are things that people are, I feel like if you're not a caregiver, if you haven't been put in this situation, you're not thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to lay out practically how you prepared your family is eye-opening as other folks are thinking about this process. There will be a lot of moving parts that you'll want to consider, and giving us a lay of the land, I feel like gives you a map of like, okay, I have all these adventures to conquer. Where do I start? But also from an emotional standpoint, like preparing yourself to be in a place where you're not the strongest one. Even though you are as a caregiver, you're the strongest one for your daughter, you're the strongest one for your family. You and your husband are the pillars. You still need other support to keep you upright. Like no house is built on like two big beams. You're the two beams, and there's all the supporting material that goes into keeping the structure sound. And so being able to say, hey, we received help financially from our family. We received help in this way. I think that it really does break a lot of the misconceptions or maybe cultural practices or just habits of life that keep us fighting things alone, and really learning to receive in a season where it's like absolutely necessary because you're giving so much. I wanted to ask, now that Alessia has received the transplant and you are in the throes of recovery, this is like the peak of recovery. What challenges are you and your family and Alessia facing? And how are you coping with them as they come up?
I think there's a lot of them. I think getting back into a routine while being at home is hard because you still have to you have to add getting back into your old routine is not a thing because now you have medications that need to happen at different times of the day. But there's also the pains and aches that she experiences because of the whole process. So one of the big things is that she's not eating as much as she used to eat. So we are worried. Like the doctors are not as worried as we are. As long as she's getting the intake of fluids that she needs for the day, everybody's happy, which she is. But we do want to see her eating. And so getting into the rhythm of that has been a little bit harder. And it's happening slowly. She's starting to eat a little bit more here and there, but she's not back to her usual appetite. So people keep asking us, when is the NG tube coming out, the nasogastric tube? And I'm like, well, we don't know. We don't know. It's when she starts eating, when her body's able to tolerate the food. One thing that people don't talk about is that your taste buds change during transplant. Like, ketchup is spicy to her now. Like anything that has onions is very spicy to her, which wasn't the case before. So it's kind of managing that. And there's like 3-4 rotating foods that she'll pick on that we just cook. And then like you try to prompt her, I'm like, can you just try a little bit more? It's like, well, no, I feel like it's gonna hurt my stomach. I don't want to throw up. So you're like, okay, like these are all very valid feelings and I don't want you to throw up because I forced you to eat 2 more bites. It's hard to adjust to that. And then you also have the doctor's visits that you have to go to. While she had her central line, that was also something that we needed to be taken care of. And I think Christelle and I had a few conversations over DMs about like, well, the skin issues. There's a lot of skin issues that come post chemo. So all of that has been like really difficult to navigate. And thankfully they're clearing up, but it's still a lot of things that have to be navigated, that you have to work through. It's not the hardest thing, but it's not easy to go through this process, and like we're coping well.
I wanted to ask this question. So during and post-transplant, for me, outside of the skin issues, I had allergic reactions to immunosuppressants. What complications, if any, did Alessia face when going through the transplant process outside of the post-chemo effects? Did she experience any complications at all?
Yes. So one of them was with the ATG, but this is not so much of complication. But during the first day of the immunotherapy, as we were preparing for the actual transplant, she she had a really high fever and she felt dizzy and very nauseous, and that was it. Complications as they are, like, I think there was just one at one point, and it was one day that her platelets kept dropping really low, and we were like, at that point she'd had 3 platelet transfusions, so it just kept going up and dropping with every transfusion. And once we got to a point where it was manageable, it was good. But there was a day where she just had a nosebleed, gushing blood that lasted 3 hours. And the next day, of course, her hemoglobin was super low, because that, like, it was a lot of blood. I remember me and the nurse were like, oh my God, she had such a wonderful day today. We're going to have an easy night. And there comes the blood, and it just, like, it doesn't stop. And me and her are looking at each other, like, what do we do? Like anything, like if we do the nasal spray, then it forms a clot, and she swallows a clot and starts coughing, and then starts bleeding again. Like, it was just like everything that we tried. And at one point we're like, we just have to let it bleed and it'll stop on its own. Thankfully, she hasn't had any other complications, and I think that that's part of her just being so young and not having gone through so much with sickle cell. Like, even though she went through a lot, it's nothing compared to what I hear people go through years in adulthood and adolescence with sickle cell.
I wanted to ask, you'd mentioned, navigating Alessia, having a nosebleed, and she's got these aches and pains and skin changes, and she's she's on this roller coaster. How do you comfort her in the middle, in these moments where she is not feeling well? How do you provide comfort for her? What advice would you give to other parents in terms of comforting their child in the middle of something hard like this?
I think you have to acknowledge that it sucks. Like, I think that's the big part that we all have an issue with. Like, this sucks. This is not good. And I think, like, part of what I do is acknowledge that. And me and my husband, we both do, and we just kind of hold her. And if she wants to listen to music, we play music. If she wants us to be quiet, we'll stay quiet. If she wants to FaceTime someone, we'll FaceTime someone. If she just wants us to just be there, we'll be there. Like, whatever she needs, we're there. Sometimes you think that this may help or that other thing may help, but if it's not actually helping them, then, and if it's something that your child doesn't want to try, then you just have to respect that, as young as they are. So I've learned to advocate for her, and she's learned to advocate for herself. But sometimes, like, you have to get poked, and, like, I ask her, do you want me to hold you? Or do you think you can sit still this time? She says, no, hold me. I'll hold you. Like, I'll hug you. I'll give you a tight hug, and I'll hold your arm. Because she knows she's going to move. But she also knows that this has to be done. And if I move, then they have to poke me again. And I'd rather just get it done this first time and not be poked.
This has been a very rich episode, Maite, and I'm incredibly grateful that our paths crossed. But I'm also incredibly grateful that Alessia has had a successful transplant journey. Vida has had a successful donor journey, and Mama and Papa have had a successful transformative therapy journey with both of their girls. But I wanted to add on a happy note, because even in the midst of the storm, there are still rainbows. And I'm my heart is filled with joy that God rewarded you and your family with this, because you needed it. Alessia's life has been one plagued by so many complications, and I am incredibly excited, one, for her to win, and two, to see what she does going forward. And she sounds like a very incredibly strong, but also aware girl. And so I wanted to ask, what are your hopes for Alessia's future now that she is sickle cell free? What are your hope and prayers and expectations for your daughter?
I think my hope and prayers are the same as every parent. I just want her to be happy. I really just want her to live her best life, and that's it. Like, just go do what you want to do, and do it respectfully, and do it, like, just live very boldly, which I think she does. But just do it louder. Do it for yourself. Like, do it do it for the people you love, because it's been a journey, and it's a journey that you won't remember. All of this was done for you, like, and for Viva, for both of you to have the best life possible, the most normal life possible, and for you to not be worried about sickle cell. I think I'm really excited for her to go skiing. That's something that she's been wanting to do that we were too afraid to do. I want her to go skiing. She wants to play in the snow. That's all she wants. She wants to, like, be able, we have a really backyard. She wants to be able to go and hop through the snow. That's, like, and that's it. Like, it's very simple things. There's, and I think that's, like, at one point you learn to recognize that in life, that it's the small things that really do make a difference. And for her, it's being able to play outside.
Thank you for that. My heart was moved, and Christelle, I could see it in your eyes as well. We were completely overjoyed because we know firsthand those simple things that people take for granted that we can now do. I shared this with Christelle a few weeks ago that I took a friend to lunch and was driving, and I was exhausted, but I was driving and listening to music, and the cars beside me were looking at me like, did she just win the lottery? And it was a moment where I said, oh my God, I'm tired, but I was able to take my friend out to lunch. I was able to run a couple of errands, and now I'm driving home, and I'm not preemptively thinking I got to pack a hospital bag. And those everyday simple things are really what make going through that grueling journey all the more rewarding. All right, so we're going to switch gears. We have a segment of our show, which is my favorite part, that's called Rapid Fire Questions, where we ask you questions, but you only have 2 seconds, right? I decided to give one. Christelle decided to give one. We're very generous, and we've given you 2 seconds to answer these questions, because that's really all you need, Maite. You're like a mental health specialist at this point, so you can crack the code, okay? Now, first question, what's the advice you get from your support system, whether that be family or friends?
Be okay being vulnerable. Yeah, I struggle with that. So just being okay with being vulnerable it's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing for me.
I think that's an excellent piece of advice that I think a lot of people could benefit from. Second question, virtual or in-person support groups? Which one is your preference?
It depends. I think virtual allows for a lot more people to join, but in person allows you to build a different type of connection with people. Like the eye contact that you're able to make through support group does a lot. The body language, the being able to talk to people before and after the support group does make a difference. The mingling makes a difference. But with the virtual one, you also do get to connect with a lot of people that are not in your state or that don't have the same experience with the same providers, that are aware of things that are going on in different places. Like, I know there's someone in the Spirit support group that's from Canada. Being able to talk to someone from Canada about the level of care that they receive there and how things work there, it's really interesting. So I think it really does depend on what you're interested in.
What's one phrase you tell someone starting this journey, the journey of transformative therapies? One phrase that you would say to someone?
Do your research and don't be afraid to ask the questions. Know all the things that could go wrong and the things that could not go wrong. Just know it. And I found the Transformers group very helpful for that. Like, you guys gave me so many tips and like questions to ask. And when I walked into that office, they're like, wow, you're asking all the right questions. How do you know all these things? I'm like,
She's prepared. Exactly. Okay, share with us one thing that always makes you smile, no matter how hard the day is.
My kids' laughter. Yeah.
My ovaries just like, when you said that. Yes.
I can also make you cry on the wrong days. So,
Oh, this is great. Maite, thank you for your vulnerability, for your honesty, for your sincerity, for your passion, and for your fearless resilience to be able to support your warrior, but not only that, to take on the responsibility of having Vida be the miracle that Alessia gets to celebrate for the rest of her life. And as someone who my older brother was my donor, it's a bond you can never break. I make a joke to him. I say we're pseudo twins because technically I'm existing right now because of your stem cells. So it's a bond that we will have as sisters that no one can ever take away from them, regardless of like marriage or like life changes. It will always make them a little bit tighter because you gave both of them that gift.
So far, it seems like a pretty normal sibling relationship, where it's like they love on each other and then are fighting the next minute. So win-win.
What a powerful episode. And honestly, I feel like I thought I understood a little bit of the caregiver experience through talking to my brother, and we have such a close relationship. But I think Maite really just blew us out of the water with just the vulnerability and the depth of information on a practical level, but also understanding the emotional, social, family building side of things. And so I'm just really grateful. I'm so grateful to have had her on the show. And oh man, I'm a little bit speechless right now. Let's be real.
To every caregiver out there, I just want to say shout out to you, especially the mothers and the fathers, because I am not a parent myself, but I have two amazing kids in my life and I know how much I love them. And when they're sick, I know how much I want to take that away. So if I'm experiencing that as an auntie, I can only imagine what that experience feels like when that is literally my DNA, a piece of my heart in physical form. So shout out to you guys. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, you can listen to Through the Genes podcast on all platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, YouTube. Whether you are an audio or visual listener, we're there and available for you to stream. So with that, we want to say bye, Sickle family. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed learning more about Maite and Alessia's story. Maite Rodriguez Caraballo has released her brand new book titled Just Like the Moon, or Como la Luna, which is a tender, illustrated story told by Zoe, a 6-year-old girl who skates through flowers and dreams and lives with sickle cell anemia. In her world, blood cells are shaped like crescent moons, hospital visits become secret missions, and hope glows like a full moon in a dark sky. With sweetness and truth, this story gently guides the reader through the experience of chronic illness while celebrating the magic of being different, the strength of childhood, and the comfort found in love and community. Just Like the Moon, or Como la Luna, is an invitation to see with empathy, to understand with heart, and discover that even in the face of challenges, every child shines in their own way. Just Like the Moon is available at your local Target, Barnes & Nobles, and of course, Amazon. We hope you'll support Maite and Alessia Rodriguez Caraballo. This show is brought to you by Beam Therapeutics, Synthago, and Kamal Therapeutics, with support from the UCSF Sickle Cell Center of Excellence, Through the Pain Inc., and Sickle Cell Prodigy.